Shane Murphy was halfway through his third beer when he leaned across the table at Red Oak Tavern and said, "Bryce, you got to tell them about Logan Hayes Webb." 10 seconds. The guys from American Legend Post 47 were having our usual Thursday night gathering. 6 former Navy men who'd served our country and now worked the DC defense contractor circuit. "Which story?" I asked, though I knew exactly what Shane meant. "The one where some trust fund kid tried to, screw you out of 95 grand and ended up destroying his daddy's company instead." Wade Turner, who'd served with me on the USS Toledo, grinned and signaled the bartender for another round. This I got to hear. I'm Bryce Coleman, by the way. 49 years old, 22 years Navy, graduated Annapolis in 2000. Spent most of my service on attack submarines doing signals intelligence work in places I still can't talk about. Got a Bronze Star for some operations in the Persian Gulf that'll stay classified until I'm dead. These days, I drive a Ford F-150 King Ranch and work in the defense contractor world, building encryption systems that keep American forces safe overseas. "All right," I said, settling back in the booth. 1:10, 1 minute, 10 seconds, but you guys aren't going to believe how this kid managed to hand me a $50 million company just because he couldn't stand the thought of me getting a performance bonus. The whole thing started on a Tuesday morning. I was in the conference room at Ironclad Systems, briefing 3 Pentagon officials on our latest encryption protocol. Colonel Martinez from Army Cyber Command, Dr. Patricia Wells from DPA, and Commander Brooks from Naval Intelligence. Not exactly people you keep waiting. Logan Hayes Webb didn't knock. The conference room door flew open like he owned the place, which technically his daddy did. This kid strutted in wearing a suit that probably cost more than most of these guys made in a month, looking like he'd just stepped off a yacht. "Dad needs to wrap this up," he announced. "Not even acknowledging our guests, I have real business to discuss." Now, 22 years in the Navy teaches you to read situations fast. I'd handled classified briefings with admirals who could end careers with a nod. But this wasn't tactical incompetence. This was deliberate disrespect. Colonel Martinez slowly looked up from his notes. Dr. Wells stopped mid-sentence. Commander Brooks, who I'd actually served with briefly in Norfolk, just stared. These weren't junior analysts. They were decision-makers on a $180 million defense contract, and this pampered. Bratt had just dismissed them like they were interrupting his lunch. "Gentlemen," I said, keeping my voice steady the way they teach you at the academy, "perhaps we could reschedule for tomorrow morning." After they left, stone-faced and clearly unimpressed, Logan plopped into the head chair like he'd just conquered Europe. The silence stretched until he spoke. "Dad wants to see you in his office now." Shane chuckled and shook his head. Kid had no idea who he was messing with. "None whatsoever," I agreed. "See, Logan was Curtis Webb's son." Curtis was the CEO, decent guy, former Army officer who understood how to treat people. But Logan, 29 years old, Stanford MBA, never served a day in his life, and convinced he was smarter than everyone else in the room. The walk to Curtis's corner office felt like a death march. Logan strutted ahead, probably thinking he'd just pulled off some masterful power play. What he didn't know was that he'd just triggered something that would bring down their entire company. "You got to understand," I told the guys. I'd been at Ironclad for 17 years. Started there fresh out of the Navy when we were just 12 engineers in a converted warehouse. Back then, Admiral Burke was still running things. Wade leaned forward. "I remember Admiral Burke. Good man, old school Navy. The best," I agreed. Burke understood something Logan never would, that the people who build the technology should control it, not the suits who inherit it. He'd seen what happened when bean counters took over defense contractors. Good people got shown the door to make quarterly. Numbers look better. About 10 years back, Admiral Burke had pulled me aside after a company barbecue. We ended up at his house, sitting on his back deck with a bottle of bourbon, talking about the future of the company. "Bryce," he'd said, "I'm writing something special into your contract. That annual bonus you earn, once it pays out, all intellectual property rights for our core encryption suite transfer to you legally and permanently." I nearly choked on my bourbon. "Admiral, what are you talking about?" Protection, he said simply. For you, for the technology, for everything we've built. Board can't sell it, can't give it away, can't let some incompetent heir destroy it. At the time, I thought he was being paranoid. The company was solid, profitable, growing, but Admiral Burke had survived hostile takeovers and market crashes. He knew storms could come from anywhere. The clause was bulletproof, I explained to my legend buddies. Burke had his old JAG lawyer write it. As long as I stayed employed, the company kept their crown jewels. But if they ever fired me after the bonus processed, they'd lose everything. Wade whistled. Everything. That clause sat dormant for a decade. Every year I'd get my bonus, the IP rights would briefly transfer to me, then automatically revert when I showed up for work the next day. Clean, simple, legal. Admiral Burke called it insurance, but standing outside Curtis's office that Tuesday, listening to raised voices through the oak door, I knew Logan was about to change the game forever. Curtis was fighting for his legacy. 6 months earlier, he'd announced a merger. With Sierra Tech Defense, a $290 million deal that would make Ironclad the leading cybersecurity contractor on the East Coast. Problem was that merger depended entirely on the encryption suite I'd built. See, the technology wasn't just software, I explained. It was a complete security architecture. Pentagon had been using our stuff for everything from drone communications to submarine fleet coordination. You can't just replace that overnight. The door opened. Curtis looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past month. Logan bounced in behind me, practically vibrating with excitement. Bryce, Curtis said, not bothering with pleasantries. We're making some organizational changes. Logan stepped forward like he was accepting an Academy Award. Effective immediately. Your employment with Ironclad Systems is terminated. He slid a termination letter across the mahogany desk. Clean, professional, final. Dated exactly 48 hours before my $95,000 bonus was scheduled to pay out. I picked up the pen and signed without a word. No arguments, no protests, just my signature on the dotted line. Logan had expected drama, shouting, pleading, maybe some desperate negotiation. Instead, good luck with the Sierra merger, son. His confusion was perfect. He had no idea what he'd just done. Shane was grinning now. And that's when the fun started. That's when the timer started, I corrected. 48 hours until bonus payment. 48 hours until Logan learned that trying to save $95,000 was about to cost his family $50 million. So there I was, I continued, taking a sip of my beer, walking out of Ironclad with a cardboard box of my personal stuff, escorted by HR like I was some kind of security risk. 22 years protecting classified submarine communications, and now I'm being walked to the door by a 20-something HR girl who probably couldn't find Norfolk on a map. Wade Turner laughed. Man, I've been there. Nothing worse than the perp walk when you know you've done nothing wrong. But here's the thing, I said. The moment I got home, my phone started buzzing like a submarine sonar during a torpedo run. I'd barely gotten my F-150 parked in my apartment complex when Shane himself called. Bryce, what the hell happened over there? Word's already spreading through the network that some punk kid fired you right before the Sierra deal. That's the thing about the Navy community. In DC, we're tight. When someone with my clearance level and track record suddenly becomes available, every defense contractor within 50 miles knows about it before the ink's dry on the termination papers. Just Logan being Logan, I'd told Shane. Nothing I can't handle. Brother, you built half the encryption systems the fleet runs on. If you're available, I've got 3 projects at Northrop that could use your expertise. Still got your TSCI clearance. Current through next year. That was call number 1. Before I could even crack open a Budweiser, Wade. Turner was on the line from his consulting firm. Bryce, heard you got the boot. Logan Hayes, Webb lose his mind. His son made the call. Logan, that preppy little snake. Hell, Bryce, he couldn't find his way out of a paper bag with a map and a GPS unit. What's Curtis thinking? I was starting to realize something Logan hadn't counted on. In 24 hours, I'd already had 3 job offers from major defense contractors. The kid thought he was destroying my career. Instead, he just advertised to the entire industry that Bryce Coleman was available, but the call that really mattered came while I was heating up leftover pizza. Bryce Coleman speaking. This is Lance Foster with Sierra Tech Defense. We need to talk now. Lance was smart money. His company had been circling Ironclad for 2 years, waiting for the right moment to make their move. His voice was tight, controlled, like a submarine captain who'd just detected an unknown contact. My legal team just flagged something in the merger documents, Lance continued. There's a personnel clause that names you specifically as essential to the technology transfer. Says if you're not with Ironclad at closing, we have the right to walk away. I sat down at my kitchen table, looking at the countdown timer I'd built on my computer. 47 hours, 23 minutes, and 14 seconds until bonus payment. That's interesting, Lance. Bryce, I'm going to ask you straight. Are you still employed by Ironclad? As of 4 p.m. this afternoon, no. The pause stretched long enough for me to grab my bottle of Woodford Reserve, the good stuff Ashley had given me for my birthday. My daughter was a junior at Georgetown, studying international relations, Dean's List, every semester. That $95,000 bonus wasn't just money to me. It was her spring semester tuition and the final payment on my divorce settlement with Linda. Sweet Jesus, Lance finally said. Do they know about the clause? I doubt it. Logan never read the contracts. Kid's the type who skims executive summaries and lets lawyers handle the details. Bryce, what would it take to bring you on board with Sierra directly? I watched. The timer count down another minute. Let me think about it, Lance. Things might be changing in the next day or two. What kind of changes? The kind that make this conversation a lot more interesting. Shane was shaking his head. You didn't tell him about Admiral Burke's clause? Not yet. I wanted to see how desperate they'd get first. The next morning brought news alerts on my phone. Ironclad's stock down 8% on merger uncertainty. Some analyst had caught wind of personnel changes and started asking uncomfortable questions about the technology. The transfer. By the time I finished my morning coffee, Logan was calling. His voice had lost all its swagger from the day before. Bryce, we need to talk. I'm listening. There seems to be some confusion about your termination. Maybe we were too hasty. I almost laughed out loud. Confusion, like accidentally firing your chief architect was just a clerical error. What kind of confusion, Logan? Sierra's lawyers are asking questions about some clause in the merger documents about your role in the technology transfer. Ah, I said, taking another sip of coffee. Section 12, subsection 4, personnel continuity requirements. You know about it? Logan, I helped write that clause. Sierra insisted on it during negotiations. They wanted assurance that key technical personnel would remain through the integration period. The silence on the other end was beautiful. I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head, trying to figure out how he'd missed something so important. Look, Bryce, maybe we can work something out. Reinstatement, back pay, maybe even a retention bonus. I'm not coming back, Logan. What do you mean you're not coming? Back? Bryce, this is your life's work. This is your company. No, I said quietly. This was my company. Now it's just another place where people make bad decisions. I hung up and called my daughter. Hey, Dad. Ashley's voice was bright, cheerful. How's work? Funny you should ask, sweetheart. I just became unemployed. What? Dad, what happened? I told her the story, keeping it simple. Logan had made a power play, fired me right before my bonus, and now the whole company was in chaos. That's terrible, Dad. Are you going to be okay? What about my tuition? And that's when it really hit me. Logan hadn't just tried to humiliate me. He'd tried to mess with my daughter's future. Ashley had worked her tail off to get into Georgetown. She had dreams of working in international relations, maybe even the State Department someday. Don't worry about tuition, kiddo. Dad's got it handled. And Ashley, I'm proud of you. Not just your grades, but the way you've handled everything with the divorce. With me being deployed so much when you were younger, you turned out better than your old man deserved. Dad, don't say that.